women police, okay?
Assalamu alaikum. Begum Nusrat Bhutto is no more with us. And today, I'm sure that everyone will agree that every daughter and every sister will be mourning along with Sanam Bhutto. Our condolences go out to the Bhutto family, the supporters, the fans, the Jialas of the Pakistan People's Party, and anybody and everybody whose lives were touched in a major way or a minor way by the matriarch of the Bhutto family. Our deepest condolences today go to Ms. Sanam Bhutto, the sole surviving child of the late Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and the late Begum Nusrat Bhutto. Ms. Sanam Bhutto, who has also lost her two brothers and her only sister, and of course the grandchildren of the Bhutto family. The tragedy of the Bhuttos almost reads like a legend. The Bhutto family perhaps is the closest that Pakistan has ever come to political royalty. Similar perhaps in many ways to the Camelot of the Kennedys or the tragedy of the Gandhi family in India, perhaps even the families of Sheikh Hasina Wajid from Bangladesh, Corazon Aquino in the Philippines, so many more names, Aung San Suu Kyi, many of these strong, powerful women who picked up the political causes when the men in their family had been brutally taken from them. But perhaps no one amongst all these names that I have mentioned have suffered as much as Begum Nusrat Bhutto. Widowed, then she lost her youngest son, then her elder son, and after that we are told that perhaps she didn't even know that she had lost her eldest daughter Benazir Bhutto, because at that time Begum Nusrat Bhutto was already suffering from the final stages of Alzheimer's disease and she had already had a stroke. We are today going to remember and honor the memory of a woman who perhaps silently, quietly, but totally, how can I say this, courageously, possibly shaped the course of Pakistani destiny. In the years 1979 to 1982, she steered the party. She was the chairman of the Pakistan People's Party after the execution of Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and one of the harshest military dictatorships in Pakistani history. Very little is known of those years. In fact, I will go so far as to say I will call them the missing years, because we have little documentation about what happened. The media was gagged, newspapers were heavily censored, interviews were forbidden. And for many of those years, much of that time, Begum Nusrat Bhutto lived in isolation, under house arrest or in prison with her daughter Benazir. Is it now not time that we honor the legacy of this incredible woman who perhaps when today the Pakistan government says she is a mother of democracy, perhaps they are more right than they realize. The government today has conferred on her the highest civil award, the Nishan-e-Imtiaz. And Begum Nusrat Bhutto's contributions must be not just recorded in television programs, but must be recorded for history, for posterity. Today, we remember the woman that she was. And first of all, I am joined by Shahnaz Wazir Ali, an MNA from the Pakistan People's Party, a woman who spent time with Begum Nusrat Bhutto, and we hope that Ms. Wazir Ali will be able to share with us some of her thoughts and observations of those missing years. Ms. Wazir Ali, sad day indeed for Pakistan People's Party, for the entire country. Ms. Wazir Ali, I guess my question to you, the most importantly, what I touched on, was the missing years. Begum Nusrat Bhutto's contribution today, I was just thinking, we really don't have any written accounts of that time. What can you share with us? What is your knowledge of those missing years?
It is time for everyone to pay tribute to one of the greatest women of Pakistan. In her memory, today, I think, when we called her Madre-Jamhuriyat, the mother of democracy, this tribute still is not sufficient to cover what her life exemplified in every respect. I think whatever tribute we pay, it must really be reflected in all the work that all of us must recommit ourselves to do for strengthening democracy. In terms of the years from 79 to 82, when she led the party through the darkest period of Pakistan's history, and I just heard you talk about various other families in other countries that also suffered, but I will say this, that I don't think that in the last century there has been any other country, any other nation where one family alone has sacrificed virtually all its members.
Absolutely. In fact, I perhaps you missed that, because I did say that perhaps no one suffered like this family and Begum Nusrat Bhutto in particular.
Yes. And you are right in many respects. I do think that Pakistan in many ways has not documented sufficiently. We are very much an oral society. Poets have written, there are writers, and I think several people have written the history of the times, right from Zulfikar Ali Bhutto when he started the Pakistan People's Party. But the documentation is insufficient. I can recall that from 79 to 82, since you're talking about those years in particular.
Particularly, yeah.
That, yes, newspapers were not allowed to print anything, and I can still remember blank spaces in the newspapers.
Absolutely.
And sometimes those spaces were just black. And many of us tuned in to BBC actually to get information.
And the People's Party, if ever referred to in the print media, was called the defunct People's Party.
And the People's Party offices were sealed. Its workers were tortured and thrown into jail. From house to house arrests were made. Young men were picked up who then stayed in jail for 11 long years.
Absolutely.
So, it was very difficult actually to get news, but news did travel.
So what were the pressures at that time on Begum Nusrat Bhutto? How did she manage to keep the party together?
Well, I think that, when you look back at 79, remember that there had been a revolution that had taken place when Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto came out.
Absolutely.
And talked about the people, the aspirations of the people, the voice of the people, the needs of the people, and the rights of the people. And when he was incarcerated, and when I would say a judicial murder took place, clearly the nation was stunned. And the party, which had already, most of our workers and many of our leaders were either underground or most of them were behind bars, were looking to see what would happen, how would this mantle be taken up.
Right.
But it's very interesting that when there is a real people's movement, the news did travel that Begum Nusrat Bhutto had taken up this mantle of leadership. She had a choice, and I think that's one defining moment, that when you have a choice and you can go away and you can live a quiet life somewhere.
Absolutely.
She chose not to. She chose to stand her ground. She chose to face the dictator. And here was a woman who knew that most of her party workers were incarcerated, and yet she said that she would lead the party, and she led the party from the front. She led the party with the message of Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. She led the party for constitutionalism, the restoration of democracy, the rule of law, and the rights of the people. And she did that with a strength beyond, I think, incomparable.
Yeah, we've been showing some photographs of her at that time, the iconic pictures that startled the world of Begum Bhutto when she'd been abused. Ms. Wazir Ali, very, very importantly, would I be exaggerating if I say that maybe the face of Pakistani politics could have been different if Begum Bhutto had not stepped up?
I think that she changed the face of Pakistani politics because she was a symbol of resistance.
Right.
She was singly the supreme symbol of resistance for the people. And when she stood up, and as I said, I can still recall those very, very dark and terrible years that we would tune into BBC, because it was BBC that told us where she was, what her messages to the people were. And even just a 2-line message from Begum actually was like, it electrified the democratic forces.
Absolutely. And Ms. Wazir Ali, before I let you go, I knew you knew her personally. We all, as I said in my introduction, that whomever she met, she touched their lives in a minor way or a major way. What was your personal memory? What is your most personal memory of her, if you could share that with us?
Well, Quatrina, there are actually, I don't know how to think of one, but maybe just very quickly, we were at 70 Clifton, and this was the time when Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto Shaheed was actually presiding over a meeting that she'd called sort of a policy group or a working group meeting, and Begum Bhutto came in because we had all been laboring long and hard with the manifesto and the fundamentals of the manifesto.
Right.
And she arrived and she said, I don't know why you're sitting in this room, because, the library of Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto is just next door. All you need to do is go into it and take his book, because he had, by that time, as you know, many of his books had already been published.
That's right.
And he said, the manifesto is right there. And, here we were all extremely intense and poring over papers and working for hours. And we had, of course, many of us had been working for weeks before that in preparation for the meeting.
This would have been 1988?
Absolutely. And she walked right in and she said, here it is.
Here it is. It's all ready. You don't have to do it anymore.
Look at what Mr. Bhutto had said, what he had written, and that is the manifesto for you. Right. And suddenly, sort of made everybody feel so much more confident. Yeah. And I think sort of with almost a few words, she brushed away probably what might have been almost 3 days more of labor of very, very senior party people sitting there. So she had a remarkable ability, I think, to come in and I don't know what you want to call it, but just
I would call it a command presence, actually.
Yeah.
I would call it a command presence. She had it, Benazir Bhutto had it.
Yeah.
The command presence. And Ms. Wazir Ali, thank you so much for sharing your time with us on this day. Now, I know when we spoke earlier, you had told me that you were in the car with some other people. So are they willing to also come on the phone and share their memories with us?
With me, Dr. Nafeesa Shah and Ms. Fauzia, Wahab, and actually we are just returning from Nodero.
Right.
We are on the road.
So could I speak to...
Yes, I'll hand the phone to Dr. Nafeesa Shah.
Thank you, Ms. Wazir Ali, for your time. And as I said today, the entire leadership of the Pakistan People's Party was gathered in Nodero to mourn the passing of a lady who may have silently shaped Pakistan's destiny. And that is, of course, the most crucial aspect, that perhaps we remember Begum Nusrat Bhutto as the wife of a Prime Minister, as the mother of a Prime Minister, but perhaps we are not giving enough importance to Begum Nusrat Bhutto herself and what she may have done to silently shape the destiny of this country. That's what we're talking about today. And joining me now is Dr. Nafeesa Shah. Dr. Shah, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us on, I know, what has been a difficult day for you. This is something that people joining us today who knew Begum Bhutto. One of the things is, she had this capacity, and both mother and daughter had this, that they could go from being these commanding political personalities to being the most caring of personal friends. And I was touched briefly by, I would say, the friendship of both Begum Nusrat Bhutto and Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, where they could go from being political personalities to being loving, caring women. What do you think made them so dynamic, so incredible?
I think it's again the Bhutto tradition, of being sort of people's people's persons in a way, if you like. Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto got it from her father, but I think Begum Bhutto also, she was deeply engaged with the people of our country, and that before Pakistan People's Party, there was very little popular politics, and people didn't want to dirty their hands and sort of get the masses in. And these are the people who, as someone today said, they opened their drawing rooms for the people of our country. So and also I think what endears us, the memory that endears me for one thing that I would want to reiterate for Begum Nusrat Bhutto is the transition, a very, very difficult period, as Madam Shahnaz Wazir Ali just pointed out.
What we are calling the missing years.
She held the fort.
Yeah.
At a time that we thought that the party would splinter, she held it together, and then she passed it on to Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto. So she actually not only took on the role of mentoring, but she passed one political heritage from the father to the daughter. But at the same time, the MRD, which is for us, at least in Sindh, that it was a very strong memory. And I think that it is a movement that has been under-theorized, that still has not been understood, or that its implications. And I think she was the one who led that movement from the front.
Now, Nafeesa, of course, your father is a very senior person in the Pakistan People's Party, currently Chief Minister of Sindh. But one of the big things that I remember used to be that in that difficult time, 1979 to probably 1982-83, when the MRD movement really begins, Begum Nusrat Bhutto would not necessarily have known who were her friends and who were her enemies. Later years, Benazir Bhutto used to talk about the fact that she was betrayed by some of the uncles. I'm not going to name names, but how do you think Begum Nusrat Bhutto charted her way through probably what was very, very dangerous waters at that time, not knowing whom she could trust, whom she couldn't trust? Can you shed any light on those missing years for us?
Sure. Today, Quatrina, I want to just tell you that a lot of us were discussing these memories, and of course, I was too small. But some of the people who were there, her friends, her relations, and the thing that they talk about her is that difficult time when she had to, live in hiding, try and get around that system of oppression, and yet continue to hold meetings, and yet continue to give her orders, and yet continue to, get the political process going. And this is all extremely tough.
This really needs to be documented. We really need to document this. We need to document this.
Yeah, this was Zia's time. Even my childhood memories are, again, how my father used to scale walls, how he used to sometimes, disguise so as to evade that particular system.
Right.
This was happening to all of us. This was happening to the civil society. This was happening to the press. And at
Nafeesa, tell us more about that. This is
the ones
Nafeesa, I'm interrupting you here.
The system.
Tell us more about that. There was no media coverage at that time. So tell us those stories about your father and how he used to evade security and the military forces of Zia-ul-Haq and do this, because this is history. We must remember this.
I think more than my father, as I said, Begum Nusrat Bhutto, the stories that I heard today was how she used to, get her political activists in, try and break the barriers that were created by that oppressive system, and yet get the movement going. Yeah. And that meant trying a lot of innovative things. But this is how she, and as I said, this was a transition period in which it was extremely important to keep the party alive.
Absolutely.
And she managed to do that. And that was a very, very
Dr. Shah, any personal memories?
One of the images that I think will be there or etched in the nation's memory is that, that picture. Whenever there's movement of democracy, one picture comes again and again, and that is Begum Nusrat Bhutto being lathi charged in the Gaddafi Stadium.
And the bleeding from the side of her face.
And I think that is what really gets her to become the Madre Jamhuriyat.
Absolutely.
If there's any image, that's that image, that here is this First Lady, and this is how she's being treated by the dictator.
Dr. Nafeesa Shah, thank you so much for our time. If you could also, I know you're sharing the car with Fauzia Wahab, so if you could pass it on to her. And meanwhile, of course, as we are talking about the legacy of Nusrat Bhutto, again, I repeat that, it occurred just as Nafeesa Shah and Shahnaz Wazir Ali were saying, that it was today, the day after she died, that we all actually sat down to think about her probably more than we ever had. And perhaps that's where we have done her a disservice, because Begum Nusrat Bhutto's contribution is possibly overwhelming and unsung and not recognized. I'm so glad that the government of Pakistan has conferred on her today the Nishana-e-Imtiaz, but more importantly, I hope and pray that the government gets professional commissions, professional historians to collect as much data as possible and document the life of this very, very incredible woman. And I think I know Fauzia Wahab is now joining me. Mrs. Wahab, thank you so much for being with us on this difficult day. You've heard what your colleagues had to say. This is a difficult time for us, isn't it? That here is this woman whom we perhaps didn't recognize in her lifetime. We always thought of her as a mother of the Prime Minister, the wife of a Prime Minister. We never thought about Nusrat Bhutto, the politician herself. Do you think it's now time for us to start trying to recognize Nusrat Bhutto as she was, Begum Nusrat Bhutto, as the individual?
Yes, I agree with you. Begum Nusrat Bhutto's contribution should be accepted and acknowledged, that her services and sacrifices for restoring democracy is, as my colleague has rightly said, is incomparable. It's commendable what she has done. Without her presence, without her leadership, I don't think that MRD or movement for the restoration of democracy could have succeeded. She was a single lady who had kept all the political forces together. She provided them the leadership, she provided them the courage, and she very bravely faced the onslaught or the suppression or oppression of the military government of Ziaul Haq.
Absolutely. And Mrs. Wahab, if you could tell us if you have any knowledge about how much did Begum Nusrat Bhutto influence Mohtarama Benazir Bhutto, her daughter, in terms of her politics and her life?
I think in her personal life we see a very large influence of her mother. For instance, the selection of her for her husband, it was influenced by her.
Right.
And overall, I think the mother's influence was very much there.
Yeah.
And if you look physically at both the daughter and the mother, it looks that she's more of a daughter to Nusrat Bhutto than a daughter to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. The similarities
are amazing. Absolutely.
Fauzia Wahab. There, but she has proved to be not only a good leader, an honorable leader, a committed leader, but she was also a good mother. She was also a very good wife, and she can be a role model for our women. And I think she will continue to inspire many generations.
Absolutely. Fauzia Wahab, MNA, Pakistan People's Party, thank you so much for having joined us tonight. And I'm going to take a short break over here. When we return, I will share with you some of my personal experiences with Begum Nusrat Bhutto, how she impacted my life and what I heard her say and heard her do. A special lady indeed. Our discussion continues. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Witness, where earlier I was talking about Begum Nusrat Bhutto. Today is our tribute to possibly one of the greatest women in Pakistan, whose contribution has perhaps not been as documented as it should be. And today, a day after her death, it dawned on me that we need to document the life of this incredible woman to find out, trace and record the missing years, 1979 to 1982, when she single-handedly virtually marshaled the People's Party's people who were available at that time, those who were not in prison or those who were not underground and trying to escape from the military dictatorship. How Begum Nusrat Bhutto held the party together at that time, because Benazir Bhutto at that time was of course very young and all the other Bhutto siblings were even younger. When you talked about personal anecdotes, I have to share my personal interaction with Nusrat Bhutto, Begum Nusrat Bhutto. I met her several times as a journalist, interviewed her, continued to interact with her, and then in June 1994, I suffered a personal tragedy. I lost my mother, and that was the most traumatic moment of my life. And then I received a phone call about 3 or 4 days after that saying that Begum Nusrat Bhutto would like to come and condole with me. So I assumed that it would be a 5-minute visit, and she was of course a powerful and a busy woman with a lot at that time. And Begum Nusrat Bhutto came to my house and she stayed there for more than 2 hours. And I can't forget that. I remember the way she condoled not just with me, but with my grandmother, with my mother's sister, with my sister. She sort of seemed to almost absorb our family at that time. And that was what made the Bhuttos special and different. I keep saying this because my relationship with Mohtarama Benazir Bhutto was that as a journalist and then also I would go literally and cry on her shoulder. And they had this amazing capacity to put aside their political personas and take on this mantle of being friends, and that is something that I think very few people can do. And today I want this personal tribute to Begum Nusrat Bhutto to be just that, a personal tribute from everybody whose lives was touched by her. And now with me on the phone is Mr. Syed Haider. He's a General Secretary of the Pakistan People's Party in Sindh and one of the People's Party's Jialas, if I may say so, Mr. Haider. I think that word applies to you, even though you hold a senior position in the party, but in your heart you are a People's Party Jiala.
Thank you for that compliment.
Mr. Haider, tell us about Begum Nusrat Bhutto, particularly any light you can shed on those critical years which I feel we have not been able to document and record, particularly because Ziaul Haq didn't allow interviews. Nobody, it was just such a harsh time. What can you fill? What gaps can you fill in for us?
Well, that was certainly a very, very difficult time for Pakistan People's Party and for Pakistan. There were hangings and there were tortures and there were jails and there were lashes. And above all, there was despondency. Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had been killed, had been martyred. And there was a friction within the party. The party workers felt that his life could be saved if the party workers were allowed to come out on the street.
Right.
Party workers had been restrained to demonstrate on the streets or to take action on the streets by some very senior party leaders, rather all of them, who said that, well, if you take the government on, if you take the dictator on, then he will not hesitate to hang Bhutto. And you will be responsible if we lose Bhutto because of your rash action. And then they were all the time assuring that they were negotiating with the generals and they would be able to save the life of Shaheed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto.
Now, Mr. Haider, I interrupt you here because I want some clarification. These were senior leaders of the PPP. We won't take names on this day, but these are people that Benazir Bhutto used to often refer to as the uncles, the ones who betrayed.
That was a term usually given, but Benazir, of course, called them uncles. They were all friends of
They were all friends of her father.
Yes, but, you know, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of commitment to stand before a dictatorship like that of Zia.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, it was a ruthless dictatorship. He was very polite. He was very nice on the surface. But deep inside his heart, he was a killer and he wouldn't hesitate. So naturally, I mean, those people with their families, they felt that perhaps it was time to sit back a little and watch how things go. And then perhaps...
Do you think that was a mistake now in retrospect? Do you think that was a mistake?
Yes, that was a technical mistake. And I think if 4 or 5 big demonstrations had been held in major cities of Pakistan, the dictator would have never dared to hang Mr. Bhutto. First, he isolated Bhutto completely. He gave the impression that nobody stands with him. And then there was this propaganda campaign, which was international, and then he managed to hang him. Most of us did not believe that this could happen. Most of us believed that Bhutto could not be hanged. And I remember one day, Begum Sahiba was sitting with Mr. Mehraj Mohammad Khan, and she was a very humble woman, as you must have experienced so many times in your personal meetings with her. And she was sitting, and Mr. Mehraj Mohammad Khan, after a couple of years of Bhutto government, had been opposing Zulfikar Ali Bhutto on so many issues. But when the thrust came and when the dictator imprisoned Mr. Bhutto, it was Mehraj who came out and said, no, we must save Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. And that re-established that close brotherly link that Mehraj had with the Bhutto family. And she was sitting with Mehraj Mohammad Khan, and she asked, Mehraj, what do you think the dictator is going to do? And Mehraj said, Begum Sahib, I don't want to say it, but I don't think that he's going to spare Mr. Bhutto.
Oh.
And then she kept quiet for a while, and she said, yes, Maharaj, that's what I think. Zia is going to kill him.
Oh my God.
But again, all of us were sitting, and she said, how can anyone kill Zulfikar Ali Bhutto? And all of us agreed, yes, it's almost impossible to kill Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Although in our minds, when we considered the options, we thought that this is the only course left for Ziaul Haq to hang Mr. Bhutto. But then once again, deep in our hearts, we didn't want to believe that this could happen. So that was our, you can say, psychological condition at that
Absolutely. I mean, I can almost, you're describing it so vividly that I almost feel like I was there listening to this. And Mr. Haider, tell me more about your memories of Begum Nusrat Bhutto. Any anecdotes where she touched your life?
She had a great respect for my late father. And she, deep inside, she was a very spiritual lady. And there was that... and you must have seen that spiritual color in Bibi Sahib Shaheed.
Absolutely.
It was their belief, their faith. And let me put it very frankly and openly. It was their firm faith in the Shahadat of Maula Imam Hussain that led them on, and that showed them the light and that gave them the strength.
Okay, Mr. Haider, if I can take you forward to 1985, and that's the year Shahnaz Bhutto was murdered in France. Can you give us some idea about, that was the second major blow that the family suffered. Can you shed some light on that year? Because the following year, of course, we know Benazir Bhutto came back to Pakistan in 1986 at great personal risk. But in 1985, Shahnaz Bhutto was murdered. What can you share with us about that year?
And Benazir Bibi brought Shahnaz home.
Absolutely.
And we buried him in Larkana. I only want to tell you one incident that happened before me. And it was during our 1988 government. Begum Sahiba was talking to all of us, and there was a visitor, and she was talking to her. And then Begum Sahiba just asked her, as ladies often do, how many children do you have? And that lady said, I have 2 sons and 2 daughters. And we saw tears rolling down Begum Sahiba's eyes, and she said, yes, I also had 2 sons and 2 daughters.
Yeah.
And because that deep sorrow in her soul, that deep wound, was all the time bleeding.
Absolutely.
Yet she managed to put up his face, and yet she managed to lead on with all the determination. But that deep wound inflicted by the death of Shahnaz Bhutto, always, it didn't just stop bleeding. It continued to.
Absolutely.
And then we saw the time when Mir Murtaza was killed.
1996.
And that really devastated her.
That was the, in many ways, the blow from which she never really recovered.
Yes. And her health was failing. She had suffered from cancer. She was, taking regular medication to stop that cancer from growing again, and that was having all the side effects that these kind of medicines.
She had developed cancer, if I'm not mistaken, in 1982, which is when she was finally allowed to leave the country. Until then, Ziaul Haq had forced her to stay in Pakistan. That's when the cancer was diagnosed and she was finally allowed to leave, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But then, you can, such women are rare.
Absolutely.
This is beyond human endurance, what she endured.
Yeah.
And this is great. Those who died once only. But here was a lady who died again and again. When her husband was hanged and when her sons were killed, she died again and again. But yet she kept that flag of struggle aloft, and she led on with courage, with determination.
Absolutely. Syed Haider, thank you so much for having shared your memories with us. Again, as I said, it's so important for us to not just record these memories, but to put them down on paper. We have to document the stories, the recollections, the memories. Our tribute to Begum Nusrat Bhutto continues. Please stay with us. You're watching a special tribute to Begum Nusrat Bhutto, who passed away on Sunday in Dubai at the age of 82 after having been ill for several years with Alzheimer's disease, and then she had suffered a stroke. I last met Begum Nusrat Bhutto in Dubai in probably 1997. Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto was, of course, there as well, and I had asked Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto if I could meet Begum Nusrat Bhutto, and she was a little reluctant at that time because Begum Nusrat Bhutto already had Alzheimer's. But I asked and I pleaded with Benazir Bhutto, please, I really cared about Nusrat Bhutto, and so Nusrat Bhutto joined us, and already by then she was suffering in fact the middle stages of Alzheimer's. Probably at that time she had lost most of her memory. She did not recognize people around her at that time, but even at that time, the grace, the elegance stayed with her. So that means that was innate to her personality. You've been looking during this program at the photographs and the images of Begum Nusrat Bhutto. Let's also remember one thing. When you look at the way she presented herself, the way she was dressed, the way her poise, her elegance, that also said a lot about the high regard that women had in those years. Sadly, that no longer remains true in Pakistan. Begum Nusrat Bhutto's passing is not just the passing of a great lady, but the passing of an iconic era. And that era is sadly drawing to a close. And we hope that someday we can recall, and I want to use the word, the glamour that she also epitomized. Joining me now is Professor N.D. Khan of the Pakistan People's Party. Again, a long-time life member of the Pakistan People's Party. And I referred to Mr. Taj Haider earlier as a politician, but in his heart I said he was a Jala. And Professor N.D. Khan, I suspect that you are also, in your inner heart and your soul, you are actually a Jala of the People's Party, aren't you? I'm sorry, I can't hear Mr. N.D. Khan.
Okay.
Okay, I can hear you now, sir. Could you repeat what you said?
Okay. Matrama Begum Nusrat Bhutto was a complete personality. We can call her the complete woman, as a wife, as a daughter, as well as a mother. Yeah. And she was a symbolic personality. A personality which can be called the consensus personality. She was a unifying force when Ziaullah imposed martial law, and after the imposition of the martial law, he declared that chapter is over, party is finished. But party was not finished. It was taken over by Begum Sahiba, and she led the nation. And
Professor N.D. Khan, tell us more in detail about that. I'm trying to get to exactly those years, 1979 to 1982. I'm calling them the missing years. We don't know enough about Begum Nusrat Bhutto and the tremendous job she did at that time.
Yes, that was the great struggle in the history of Pakistan and in the history of the Pakistan People's Party, because she was carrying the legacy, and she was the torch bearer of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto when Ziaullah was thinking that with the execution of Shaheed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, party will be over. But party was not over. And she led the party in the field, and she met out all the atrocities of Ziaullah, and she established her traditions in the party, and she was a consensus personality. She was loved by every worker, and she was regarded by every politician, though some of them were working with Ziaullah, but they came to 70 Clifton, and MRD was formed. So MRD was the beginning of the end of Ziaullah. Right. I think that it was her personality which created the phenomena of MRD, because such instances are very rare in the history or in the political science. But
Professor N.D. Khan, give me the benefit of your political acumen here as well. If Begum Nusrat Bhutto hadn't stepped up in 1979, if she hadn't done what she did, what would have been the future of Pakistan's politics? I mean, I've been thinking about this all day today. Perhaps we wouldn't have had a democracy.
She stood for the empowerment of women also, and I think that you can see in the very walk of the life that everywhere women are seen. I think this is one of the contributions of Mohtarama Nusrat Bhutto, and she was, as a matter of fact, was a force behind the democracy, and it was a force behind the federal system of the government. And
Professor Adi Khan, how hard was it? What were the hardships that she faced in those 3 years, 1979 to 1982? Can you describe some of the environment at that time, what she used to have to face?
She faced every atrocities of the regime of that time, but it was her struggle which inspired whole of the nation, and including the workers of the Pakistan People's Party. And I believe if she was there, everybody was united. Everybody was behind her. She was enlightenment. She was a force of struggle. She was a force of, in other words, for the unity among women and the men.
And yes, Professor Adi Khan, tell me more about that, because one of the main things that I also want to, I mean, again, I've been thinking about this today. The reason why Mohtarama Benazir Bhutto became the Prime Minister, the first woman Prime Minister of a Muslim country, is because Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and Begum Nusrat Bhutto were themselves educated, liberal, progressive people, were they not? That's why we ended up with the Bhutto dynasty.
Well, I call it the troika of the Bhuttos, and one is not, all of them are inseparable. They are united with each other. And the legacy of the Bhutto was carried on by Begum Sahiba, and which was converted to Benazir Bhutto. And she led the nation. I think that it was she who inspired Mohtarama Benazir Bhutto, and she is the motivating force of struggle, of unity, of unanimity,
absolutely,
of women empowerment. She was a multi-character personality.
But we don't really see much of that. But Professor Adi Khan of the Pakistan People's Party, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on this sad day, but a day that we thought was important to pay a tribute to Begum Nusrat Bhutto. Thank you, Professor Adi Khan, for your time. And again, as I've been talking about in this program and sharing some anecdotes with you, there were qualities to Begum Nusrat Bhutto that were very special. Another small incident which I have to share with you. Here is a woman who is beautiful, glamorous, sophisticated, elegant, grace, and we were sitting one day casually, and I just sort of noticed a pair of shoes she was wearing, and I said, Begum Sahiba, nice shoes. And she smiled and she immediately held out her foot and she said, oh, do you like them? $9.99 from that little shop on a sale in New York. And I laughed. And that was just, what we call in Urdu, kifayat shari. The ability to take something which was a quality that I think we had when we were growing up, and I don't see it in this new generation. Now it's like showing off your money and your power and your wealth. And Begum Nusrat Bhutto epitomized the fact that if you gave her a compliment, she'd always say, oh, you know what, I conserved money. I was a good kifayat shari. I don't know if there's a translation for that. Joining me now is Begum Abida Hussain. I'm going to ask her if she can help me translate this word, because I love that quality. I love that quality of Begum Nusrat Bhutto and so many women of that generation to be able to simply look fantastic and then, brush off compliments by saying, oh, no, we didn't spend money on this, we didn't do this. Begum Abida Hussain, talking about the different facets of of Begum Nusrat Bhutto, and this is, the time when I was just telling this anecdote, I've been telling so many more. Tell me about kifayat shari and what it really means.
She used to say that I'm very thrifty.
Okay.
And I'm very careful. And I recall an incident when my mother and I went to see her, and she said to my mother, she said, tell me, Begum Abida Hussain, how do you keep your cash? So my mother said, Begum Bhutto, there's this wonderful new scheme which your husband's government has announced.
Okay.
It's called half deposit.
Half deposits, yes.
And it's I have put I've got 2 khas deposits of 5 lakhs of rupees each. And I put one in the name of my daughter and one in my own name. And they are giving a very good interest rate. So Begum Bhutto looked at her and said, you know, Begum Abida Hussain, I'm delighted to hear you say that. You see, my husband gave me 10 lakhs of rupees, and I have also bought khas
deposits.
And I have put 1 khas deposit in my name and 1 khas deposit in the name of my daughters, Benazir and Sanam. And she said, and you know, the interest rate is so good that I have told my daughters that your wardrobes, your clothes and my clothes, all of it and whatever little accessories we buy will come out of the interest of this khas deposit.
Amazing.
Yes.
You know, and I love these stories because they tell us so much more. Throughout this program, Begum Abida Hussain, I've been talking about the fact that there's so much we don't know about Begum Nusrat Bhutto. Her life has not been documented properly. Can you share with us some of your early memories about, especially 1979 to 1982, after Zulfikar Ali Bhutto Sahab was hanged and Begum Nusrat Bhutto steered the party?
Well, you know, my most important memory of that period is when Begum Bhutto, I read in the newspapers that she is going to lead a demonstration and all people that are interested in walking behind her should reach Gaddafi Stadium. And I loved her because she had given me a lot of affection. So I decided to go. And but I was a little uncertain because I had left the People's Party in 1977 during the election process.
Right.
So I was very hesitant to get down before I saw her. And, you know, the thought in my mind was that as I would see her, I would rush towards her and hug her and then fall in line somewhere in the back.
Right.
But I was sitting in my car and I was told that she's heading in the direction of Liberty Chalk.
Right.
So I was close, my driver was driving I told him to drive very slowly, and I was heading towards Liberty Chalk from the Gaddafi Stadium end.
Right.
When there was a God Almighty, enormous police posse that appeared.
We're a little short of time, Begum Sahiba, if you could just, you know, because I'm running out of time here.
Yes, and she faced that lathi charge, and I saw her taking a hit on her forehead.
Oh my God.
And swooning and falling. But the fact of the matter is that the very next day, she was walking again.
That's so amazing. Begum Sahiba, I'm sorry, I would, you know, I think this is something that we have to revisit. Begum Abida Hussain, thank you so much for having joined me today, and we are going to continue this because first, of course, I'd like to thank you for your time. And most importantly, as I've been saying in this program, that sadly, a day after Begum Nusrat Bhutto died, I was trying to, you know, think about everything I had read about the family, the Bhutto dynasty, and so much, you know, as journalists, I was involved peripherally from 93 onwards when I started reporting on the Bhuttos. And I realized there's so much about her we don't know. And as I have said, and I will now make an appeal to the government of Pakistan, the Pakistan People's Party, please commission a professional historian to write a biography of Begum Nusrat Bhutto. It is going to be so important to make that kind of book, because otherwise we're going to be left with huge gaps in our knowledge of the Bhutto family. So I'm going to leave you now with some images again of Begum Nusrat Bhutto, and do notice the 2 images in black and white, one in which she's being held up, just as Begum Abida Hussain said, when she's got a mark on her face. That's the day of the time when she was lathi charged in Lahore. That's in the montage too. Khuda Hafiz, Begum Nusrat Bhutto.